Hello. So recently I posted a talk in which I made a proper fool out of myself. Understand that I tell you that 1 plus 1 equals 2, expressed as consciousness, is an organic process, mimetically driven or fueled, leading to mind, where mind is that state of consciousness which exists now. And then I go and spend 6 weeks on a talk where the premise of which is based on terrible, simple math. To tell the world, or anybody that will listen, that this is how consciousness and mind works. Not just that, but I think it's universal. I think it is how it works universally out there. And then give a talk based in absolutely, I don't know, you start to wonder when you've made a proper fool out of yourself, you start to wonder, how did that happen? What is the vulnerability? Where's the blind spot that I overlooked that led to this? See, the upside to being me and doing this work is that even if I make a proper fool out of myself, which I'm sure that the last talk I uploaded and then deleted, you can't find it anymore, like 18 people are aware of how foolish I am. Well, at least from that talk's indications. But the freedom that is involved in being me, see, I'm not wealthy, I'm not powerful, I'm not influential. I just enjoy the work of meditation, dreaming, building, the idea of terraforming. That's where I thrive. I could do that the rest of my life and never say word one to anybody about it, and just be a happy little recluse meditating. But instead, I'd rather risk being a fool and try to help. It's a great freedom. The freedom to be a fool and not have it devastate you. See, that's something the Me Too and the left really got wrong, the Me Too movement. The years of canceling people for mistakes, that did not advance our society one little bit. It set us back quite a bit, I think. But supposedly we are beyond that now, which I highly doubt. See, I do these talks, and when I meditate, I think to myself, if these things are ever going to be successful, if for some reason something were to go viral and suddenly I found myself with money. The last talk, the foolishness about it was, I thought I had found a quick path. It's always a vulnerability for us when we work hard and we think we found something that would make it all happen just almost magically overnight. Anytime that happens, it should be a red flag. I should have had red flags. I don't know how I missed that. But anytime something seems too easy, it should be a red flag that foolishness is occurring. What I see, what I plan, what I would like to build is not simple. It doesn't have an easy fix to it. It would take work. And I dream about, when I meditate, I dream about if I were to have something go viral, that would make my life far more complex. See, for someone like me, coming into money would only mean I have way more work to do. Because the plan I see would take a lot of effort, a lot of work. It would eventually be self-replicating, but the initial startup, that's a lot of work. So the solution I had would have made it easier for everybody else and a lot harder on me. Anyways, and really, what would it benefit me if I were to just give up right now? I wouldn't be talking to you right now. I wouldn't feel that pressure to not only do the meditative work, but to share what I find when I do it. So that would maybe make my life a little easier, but at the same time, by giving up something like that, you give up purpose. If you found yourself in your work where you're trying to achieve something or help someone or help others, and you find yourself in the same position I am, where you have been a fool and people have known you're a fool, to give up means relinquishing that purpose. If you are like me and you've chosen some kind of work to do that would benefit others, and then by being a fool you decide to give it up, how much do you really care? I mean, how much did you really care all that time about actually helping if a little bit of foolishness makes you stop, makes you give up? I think it would probably be better to take that embarrassment and turn it into opportunity. One of the things that happens when you do something, or when I do something like this, see, right now I am talking to you and I haven't made any advancements in my kit here. One of the things that kind of paralyzed me from doing this talk was that, well, I've been a fool. Maybe I should take extra steps. Like, maybe I should upgrade the quality of my talks. I should upgrade the quality of my recording. I should. See, those kinds of thoughts, while productive, if they stop you from doing the work, like if it had stopped me from doing this talk this morning, that's something that can continue ongoing. Right now, my thinking process is get a desk that doesn't squeak, get a chair that works out better, get a better camera, get a better PC so that I can start to introduce AI. I put AI on this thing and it did not like that very much. I definitely need to upgrade. But you see that thinking? That thinking of, well, I should do this before I take action can only lead to more I should do this things. Like I should get a better camera. Well, then I better not talk until I've got that plan worked out. But oftentimes those plans don't work out. So, as opposed to just quitting, here we are today. And I highly recommend that for anything that I talk about meditation and finding purpose. If you find purpose and let some kind of iteration of foolishness stop you from moving forward, if there's one thing I could express to you today is that don't let that happen. Those things that would stop us come in many forms. I got lucky. My embarrassment was caught by me. Nobody bothered to make a... I shouldn't say it that way. Nobody commented, hey, dumbass, here's what you're doing wrong. Only 18 people are even aware of it. But it could be much worse for somebody out there who has been a fool and everybody noticed. I imagine that would be the problem if I had made this foolish mistake after having been, had accumulated a huge following, lots of likes, views, and shares, and then suddenly the entire world sees the foolishness. It could have been much worse. If you are in that position, how much worse is it for you to start and start again? And if you were to start again, how much added purpose could you bring to your work because of the foolishness that has been found out? After this happened, I spent a good week, and still I still use it as subject matter for my meditation. But I spent a good week just meditating on the foolishness that goes on in our species. Because it's not just you, it's not just me. We all experience this stuff. What would it benefit you or I to just give up? For me, if I wanted to give this up, give up the purpose that I have found, what would I fill that void? See, when I meditate and when I think of things to say, when I make my notes, when I give my talks, I'm expressing my own power. What would my utilization of that power look like if I decided to give up my purpose? What has it looked like for you? What way have you used your power after you've given up? If you cannot find an example of how you use your power after you've given up, are you using your power at all? What was the point of discovering and developing and strengthening it if suddenly something so simple as being a fool, because it happens to all of us, it happens to everybody, if something so simple stops you from further growth? What are you doing with it in absence of purpose? And if you're not doing anything with it, is it diminishing? What would I do if I were to give up my purpose? Well, I've been a gamer all my life. I guess I could go back to gaming. So my decision when I meditated on and discovered that question or option or whatever you want to call was to give up gaming. So as of now, there are 0 games on any devices in my house right now. And every penny I would have spent on that, which turns out it was quite a bit, I've decided to put towards enhancing my kit so that I can do this more efficiently, more effectively. Well, I could socialize more. I'm a recluse, but I wasn't always a recluse. I'm marginally attractive. I could go out and socialize more. But really, a girl is the only real bait to get me to do that. I'm pretty happy in my solitude. And to be perfectly honest, it's not enough bait. I could change jobs. One of the things I like about my little manual labor job is that in performing my job, I can reach flow states that allow me to enhance the meditations I have, which allows me to enhance my work here with you. How about just letting that anger and frustration just take over? Well, there's already enough in this world to anger and frustrate us. It isn't really doing anybody any good right now. Why add to it? If you already have the purpose and the outlet to use the power you've discovered in yourself on, why turn that to anger and bitterness and frustration? It just seems pointless. So, forget giving up. There's no freaking point to that. So I will not give up. And it's a good thing too, because the talk I made a fool of myself on pointed out some very good things, some very important things. For one, there is a definite paradigm shift coming to this planet right now, and I don't think there's anything any of us could do about it to stop it. So no matter what I do or how well I do it, that paradigm shift is imminent. I'm talking now about AI and robots, which I am just going to shorten to AI and R, so I don't have to say all that stuff. So the paradigm shift that is coming for us right now is AI and R. And in light of that paradigm shift, any plan that is made now for a better society must include those two elements. What if we plan, since it's coming anyway, this paradigm shift is coming anyway, so anything we do between now and its arrival, it's pretty much already here, but within the next couple of years, it's going to be a different world. How do we plan for that? How do we build society today with anticipation of that paradigm shift that is on the horizon? How do we build our businesses, build our corporations, so that instead of this heavily weighted towards the top and the anticipated trickle down that almost never comes, how do we utilize the paradigm shift that's coming, AI and R, to better enhance and build a system that works better for everybody? What degree of the problems we have with societal purpose right now what degree of those problems is caused by this heavy weighted towards the small number of people, towards the 1%? How can we shift that paradigm to grow mind and consciousness broadly? I am going to assume, I know that's dangerous, but I'm going to assume that AI and R could manage the depth of society on its own, that we could, in effect, automate the depth of our society. That would be the wealth and resources that we generate, the management and administration of those resources and that wealth. AI will be able to do that far better than any CEO there is, any banker or accountant that ever existed. So the depth of society can be automated. What we would have to focus on is the building and development of the width of society, so that both functions of the bedrock of a society are covered. AI and R covers the depth, we cover the width. Can that societal plan be done in such a way that it encourages the growth of mind and consciousness? See, that was the point of the talk I made a fool of myself in. The point was that no matter how we distribute all this wealth, because there's memes all over the place about what would happen if we distributed all the wealth of the world. Who cares about that? The caring about that means you're missing the point of what that wealth is actually worth. If you say to me, we're going to redistribute all of the billionaires' wealth in the world, essentially that wealth becomes worthless. Because to distribute, let's say we distributed the wealth of one of these billionaires to everybody in your town. Maybe that works. Maybe that helps the infrastructure of your town. Maybe it helps the mood and mindset of your town. But by and large, most of that distributed wealth will be frivolously wasted and find itself right back in the pockets of people who are ultra wealthy anyway. The system is designed to funnel up. If for some reason you take a little bit of the up and you distribute it out there, it still funnels up. Redistribution of wealth isn't the way to go. The distribution of created wealth, that is the way to go. To change the system so that created wealth, this trickle-down thing that never works, is just bypassed. If AI and R can stabilize our society in depth, and we are free to grow in width societally, and grow in such a way that the purpose of that society is to enhance and encourage the growth of mind, what would something like that look like? That society would have, well, all right, I'll get into that in a little bit here. Before moving on to this next stage, this next segment, I'd like to point out that I've been talking about foolishness here, and there are some very large, well-accepted areas in which foolishness is understood across humanity. Let me give you a few examples of that just here in my own country. One of the most vivid examples of societal foolishness is, at least to me, is the way in which we treat our animals. It won't take you long, if you really want to know, if you just did some Google searches or let it flip through your reels, let your algorithm hit on how cruel we are to animals. It won't take you long to find just how foolish we are. This talk isn't about that, it's just an example. How about in 2024, the collective debt of all humanity was $318 trillion. We were born on our planet, and the result of the society we built here is that as a whole, humanity owes $318 trillion. Alright, this talk isn't about that, but it's a good example. How about in our country the state of our food chain? If you're alive and aware today and you don't know how absurd our food chain is, a little bit of Google searching will explain that to you too. How about this one? I just saw this on Bill Maher last week. About 5 years ago, we were talking about people who were losing their jobs. I think it was an oil pipeline or something where guys were losing their jobs. And the advice that was given to them was learn to code. Now remember that, like if you took all the painters I know and suddenly made them without a job, they have no job whatsoever, and told us, the secret to your success in the future is to learn to code. I know some painters. I've worked with thousands in my life. That advice is worthless on its face. To say nothing of 5 years after the fact, in hindsight, how ridiculous that advice is. Because coding is about the most basic thing AI can do, and AI is coming. So essentially, we took the jobs, we told them how to prepare for their future, and within 5 years, the preparation was absurd. It's not just me who has behaved foolishly. It's not just you who has behaved foolishly. It is us, in general, as a whole. Alright, part of my talk where I made a fool of myself was discussing archetypes and Bill Gates specifically. Bill Gates has recently announced that he's planning to give away a $200 billion endowment to charity, primarily to Africa. And I built my foolishness off of that, which we will not go into today. But it sets up a discussion about archetypes. A while back I did a little reel. This is just a random idea or whatever, and I did a reel on the archetype of Elon Musk. And Bill Gates fits the archetype of Elon Musk, no matter how they feel about each other, no matter what they have to say about each other. These are people who became ultra rich with the understanding that they were in it to help humanity, to better our lives. And each of them, Gates and Musk, have done that. They have introduced things to our society that have improved life for us. Gates, the internet, the software that runs the internet. Musk, let's see. What is Musk doing that he's just so busy? Rescuing astronauts, developing new battery systems that could change the world, Neuralink, which is enhancing life for how many humans and has potential to advance life for how many more, made the electric car commercially viable, which now seems to be irrelevant because now it could be hydro. That hydro is weird because I know that there was a guy, an American, who developed a hydro-powered car and then disappeared. I mean, I've been seeing memes and stories about this guy all my life. Well, maybe not all my life, but for a long time. And now suddenly it's viable. See, that's two things actually. Because Musk is now developing an aluminum ion battery from what I understand. And I'm almost certain I have been seeing talks and data about aluminum ion batteries for years. See, it doesn't really matter to me from this vantage point, from this perspective, whether or not they are Musk's creations or whoever's creations. I mean, I'm sorry for the system that enabled somebody who made a discovery to just be vanished, and then suddenly, decades later, somebody else has the same idea and it becomes successful. I don't like that our society does that. I would like to build to eliminate that. But at the same time, if the aluminum ion battery is the future, I'm glad at least somebody is doing something with it. Maybe it takes an archetype-like person like Musk or Gates or whoever else fits this bill to actually make something like the aluminum ion battery or the hydrogen car. Well, that's actually Japan. But maybe it takes an archetypal-like power in order to make something like that actually succeed. Because that archetype comes with a certain amount of privilege. It is easier for somebody with the power and connections of an archetypal person to make a successful go at something than it is for someone like me who builds it in their garage and then just gets bumped off by some random dude. Maybe that's just the way our society is going to have to bring it to the fore. But with AI and R coming into this new paradigm, I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of this bumping off of the inventors in their garages anymore. And maybe that was all conspiracy theory to begin with. Maybe they didn't have, and now it is viable because now it is real. I don't know. Conspiracy thinking is a waste of energy for me. One of the foolish things I put into that last talk was the idea that these archetype-like people are the people we need to build this new society. I think that that's weak and magical thinking. While for my plan to be effective, it would be have much better chances of success if it had the backing of somebody like an archetypal person like Musk, Gates, whoever, because of the power and influence they bring to the building of it. Because what I see is going to run up against all kinds of foolishness, from graft to people who don't want it to succeed to just building codes, for a different part of the discussion here. I think that it would be better to inspire broadly, develop wide. Let the depth be taken care of, be automated. I mean, really, an archetype type person like Musk or Gates is kind of a sort of automation anyway. It takes no work for me to develop the aluminum ion battery because I have an archetype in the world already doing so. That is what this new paradigm would be. I don't have to develop the battery or the connection or the distribution node or that intricate little part that would be easily replicated that makes the distribution of energy much more simple. I don't need to develop that because AI and R is doing that. That's the depth. We need to build the width. So I think part of the foolishness of that talk was that it depended on the redistribution of power and wealth from archetypal-like individuals. I think that is a foolish and magical way to think about it. I think that while the new system being built would greatly benefit from having archetypal-like backing, I think that is the wrong way to build it, because distribution is our main problem on this planet. To come to the state where we have archetype-like people already walking amongst us is built in a system that is flawed, that we want to reverse, or I want to reverse. Those archetype-like people would exist in reputation and respect, but they wouldn't exist in something like disgusting wealth. Which would be helpful because, as we have seen, those archetypal-like people make a lot of foolish mistakes themselves. When they do it with a backing of hundreds of billions of dollars, which makes foolishness, absurd, but kind of fun to watch. So, with all that said, I want to talk a little bit about the plan that I have. Right now, in your feed, I don't know, for me anyways, because of my algorithm, I get a lot of homesteading reels and videos, shorts, talks, whatever you want to call them. And I wonder to myself, what does homesteading really look like in light of the new paradigm that is coming for us? What do these homesteading shorts and talks and reels What do they look like when there are robots doing pollination work and AI scheduling out your when to water, what to do with the soil, how to produce more, where to produce it, what to do with it once it's produced? What does homesteading actually look like once you introduce AI and R broadly? So, for my plan, which would be made so much easier with backing of somebody archetypal like Gates, because not just the money, forget about the money. I don't even want to think about the money. But think of how much farmland this guy has. But he is archetypal. He is not useful when it comes to actually changing things. He is just useful when it comes to actually dreaming about how to change things. For me, anyway. See, if I had access to, let's just say 1,000 acres. I may be being foolish again and I'm a little leery of it. See, that it's another thing being foolish does for you. It makes you second guess things that you say that aren't, like, it's not in my notes, so what if I say something foolish? So 1,000 acres is just something to visualize. Maybe that's actually a small parcel of land and it's just laughable to somebody who's archetypal. But with 1,000 acres and the idea of AI and R combined with homesteading, what I would do is I would set up individual plots. I would build these plots until they're capable of generating enough energy, water, utilities for our first castle. Now, when I say castle, you don't have to think medieval castles, King Arthur, or any of that. Think Burj Khalifa is a palace or castle. Think some of the most interesting architecture on our planet right now could be envisioned as castles. I've got pictures and reels in my phone right now of interesting buildings that I've come across, whether they're AI generated or whatnot, that would make great castles and energy generators and water generators and all of that. But I would build homesteading individual plots until those plots are powerful enough to sustain a castle. In my first castle, because I dream about this all the time, I would put a development company that would be the people working on how to develop the land to increase this model's efficiency. I would put a production company in to advertise this land and the people working it and building this dream, not only for the revenue but for the replication of the idea. See, yes, at first this plan should be commercially viable. It should be something that generates revenue in order to increase the effectiveness of its duplication, in order to increase the desirability of its being replicated elsewhere in the world. So development company, production company, and I would put administration in it. Let's say you only develop 200 acres and that gives you enough to form your first castle. Then in that castle should be those two key companies or corporations, whatever you want to call them, and administration for the land that's being developed and what's being developed going forward. And then I would continue to build under the model until you could put in your second castle. But for me, I think the second castle would be something like a retirement village. Think of all of these homesteads that are feeding power, water, food, clothing, shelter into the system itself until it can build a castle, which gives you administrative power, storage for all the equipment, everything that you need to do to keep on building. Yeah, and then once you keep on building and you're ready for your second castle, I think a retirement village would be the way to go. Because for me, one of the foolish behaviors I see in humanity is the way in which we treat retirement. It can run the extreme from one retirement village I work at where they have $1 million suites and only rich people can afford to live there, but they're taken care of, to people who have no resources that are taken care of in these tiny little sweat boxes. with people who are underpaid taking care of them, so that the treatment and care that they provide is disturbing sometimes. That, to me, is an expression of foolishness in our behavior. For me, with the dream would be first castle, development, production, administration, second castle, retirement village. Imagine that. You've got all of this power behind your retirement village. What kind of retirement village could you build when food, power, water, clothing, housing, none of these things are costing you money anymore? The purpose of the society you're building is to pay for all of that and enhance the development and growth of consciousness and mind. What does a 15-hour work week? Because I see a lot of memes about this too, about how we're going to shorten our work week because AI is going to get rid of all these jobs and whatnot. What does a 15-hour work week look like if it doesn't look like chores? If I reside in a homestead environment, and I've got robots that take care of an AI that plans, what does my 15-hour work week look like if I don't have to worry about food, water, any of these things? I think it probably looks a lot more like chores than it does like a job. And another area where foolishness is quite visible in humanity is in government. Understand, the vulnerability of government is the less they control, the less power they have. If food, shelter, water, all of these things are taken care of, and they have less power over you, they have less significance. The corruption, if it still exists in this society, I envision, which it would, because humans are humans, is less impactful on your day-to-day life because they have less control over the things that make your life worth living. The vulnerability of the wealthy is money. It's weird. It's very weird. When I dream about this, I say 1,000 square acres, and I tell you that could be foolishness, but I think about this place as locked off when you first start the development. In the beginning, when you're building and when you're moving the earth around and laying out the foundations of what you want to build, lakes, ponds, streams, rivers, you'll need that heavy traffic. I'm a construction worker. I know what the heavy traffic looks like. But once developed, once residents are in there and things are starting to move forward, I would lock it off so that I would design it in such a way so that no actual cars, trucks, stuff like that actually go through the development. I would develop in such a way that motor vehicles would work on the outside of it, and everything inside would be electric. See, that's one of the ways Musk went wrong. Musk built electric vehicles for the world we live in today. He didn't build the infrastructure for electric vehicles to actually make sense. This changes things in such a way that electric vehicles make more sense because they're not pushed to be utilized the way we utilize them. As far as overflow of stock, one of the things when talking to people who garden or watching these homesteading videos is that there's often, if I grow a ton of tomatoes, I have no use for all these tomatoes. So what I would build is the living on the inside, the homes and the castles and whatnot, would build for infrastructure on the fringe. It would, where a market could be built. I mean, these are things that we have always done, but we haven't organized them in mass. We haven't put our minds to the idea that this is how we should build for humans. But if you have on the periphery of this thing a market that is built for it, I would start in the north, because I dream about terraforming, and it would be easier to terraform North American continent by starting in the north and building towards Mexico. So I envision it in the north. I would build it somewhere, ideally somewhere located close to a city that could use a lot of help. And I think most cities today could use a lot of help. I think California is a good example of that. We see a ton of homeless, we see a ton of poverty, we see a ton of struggle. If I were to build this, I would build it in such a way that any overflow or waste could just be donated. You could build that infrastructure. There was this, I did a talk on it, California Forever. These people wanted to build the society, something like what I dream. Well, I didn't see their actual plans. And they were going to build it in California, and they got the town where they wanted to build it, there was a lot of pushback on it. The town itself said, look, we will give you this city block. Build your infrastructure and show us what you intend to do. If you prove to us what you want to do, it would be a lot easier for us to work with you going forward. If you built this, what I am dreaming about, and then built inside the city as a distribution hub, I get it. They tell me that I will never be allowed to do this, because if I could find a way to end that struggle and probably recruit from people who are healing from living in that struggle. Anyways, that's how I would do it. Or the basic layout of how I would do it. To end this talk, I want to talk about how I think that this is mandated. If you believe in God, I believe in God. I believe in the God of the Bible. I don't believe many who call themselves Christians actually do. I think they've missed the point of that book. I think that understanding this is mandated from God. I think that if end times come, they have only come because we have failed to understand the mandate that God has given us. Let me show you a couple examples of how that's happened. So, initially, science was started by religion to better understand and glorify God, the Creator God. And then Darwin comes along, who operated that way. He was a minister. His idea of naturalism was to understand and better glorify his God. He discovers the first replicator in DNA. Actually, Watson and Crick showed it to us, but he discovers that process that is built on DNA. DNA, which is the first replicator we discovered, which is the first big major insight into the power of God that we discovered through our science, turns around and sends religion into this struggle of survival. There is another means in this world known that would make it possible for us to be where we are now without God. And that is the struggle that has gone on my entire life when it comes to religion. Science is created to understand God's power. Science discovers an enormous part of God's power. That discovery leads to a lack of faith in God. That is the foolishness of the church. And because we didn't learn from it, the same thing happens in 1976 with Richard Dawkins, who discovers the second replicator, the replicator of mind, which is something I have meditated on probably too much in my life, but what I am coming to understand as the Word of God. I think what Richard Dawkins discovered is the replicator that is described as the Word of God in Scripture. And again, he takes his discovery and goes so far as to do TED Talks about about what was it? Militant atheism. And I've seen him recently do a talk where he said that there's probably no one person, there's probably no entity on this planet that could convince him that there is a God. There is no argument that could be made to convince him that there is a God. And this is the man who discovered the Word of God. Understand that vulnerability and foolishness in religion. And also understand, when I say religion, I am talking about us. I am not talking about God. I am talking about us. Think of religion as God has his people walking through the wilderness for 40 years, and anytime he verbalizes something to them, we wig out and do weird shit. I imagine that the entire Old Testament is a tribute to how frustrating it must be to have been a God interacting with us on our level of understanding. That to me describes the entirety of the Old Testament. We create science to understand God. When we start to understand God, we use it as proof that God doesn't even exist. That is our foolishness. Now, if you just took a second, if you stopped praying for rapture and for the end of days and for revelations to start happening, and you started thinking about how much power has been revealed to us about our God, just in those two replicators alone, that's where my ideas, my thinking of mandate from God comes from, because I have not missed that point. I am trying to illustrate to you that point. You have misunderstood the intention of our God. The intention of our God is not to sit here as, okay, fallen, fine, we are fallen. Are you going to get up and do something about it? Instead, religion argues that there's absolutely nothing we can do about it, when I think it was mandated by God that we should do something about it. There was an enormous piece of work done, and I've talked about this before. The Creator God did this enormous work from freeing the Israelites until Jesus dies on the cross, all to impart into us empathy. Why? Why that work? Why that result? Because to build what I talk about building, you cannot do it without empathy. If you build society free of empathy, you get what we have now. I definitely think we need a lot less desperately praying for rapture and the end of days, and a lot more praying to increase our empathy and understand the actual power and purpose God has given us. What would? All right, just imagine for a minute that I've talked about this before, that there are opposing energies in this universe. I labeled them creative and entropic energy. If you believe like I do that God is real, then God is the powerhead, the figurehead of creative energy. If you believe that, and you believe that there is an adversary, someone who is in power over entropic energy or utilizes entropic energy, what would a goal be for the being that is in charge of entropic energy? If humans create science to understand God, that would be the opposition to entropic energy, and then they make a discovery like replicators, the base functions of the universe, DNA, memetics. What would your goal be if you are the opposition, if you are the devil? What would be a victory? What would a victory look like for you as humanity discovers these things? I would argue that a victory for the opposition looks exactly like what we have now. A loss of faith, a loss of structure, a loss of cohesion in spiritual beliefs and spiritual development. I would argue that all of this energy that has been spent in debating people like Dawkins, or arguing about things like Darwin, or debating about how long or how old this earth is, all of that was a victory for the opposition. Somebody I greatly respect, who is of a mind, who believes in God, has said to me when I try to start a conversation, I say, what did you think about this? And they say, oh, well, evolutionary thinking has no interest to me. I have no interest in that. Well, what can I do with something like that? This is a tool that God uses. You're blinding yourself to how God actually works. What would a victory look like to the opposition? We discovered incredible instances or examples of how powerful our God is, and it caused us to lose faith. to lose cohesion of faith, to lose development of faith, I'd say that's a victory for the opposition. Essentially, somehow, the Lord of dystopia and entropic energy took the discovery of the power of God and used it against God, and we allowed that to happen, and it resulted in desperate prayers for annihilation. It's just, if anything, if there's anything that gives a perfect example of foolishness to me, that is it. And I think that's about where I want to end this anyway. Yeah. So I'm near the end of this video, and I just want to mention some things. I have been a fool. I've gotten rid of that, but I have definitely been a fool. And in doing so, I've rethought a lot of my functionality in this work. I think that while the focus on likes, shares, and influence is very disruptive to the actual work, it should be given some consideration, at least in the end of my talks. If this has been useful, if you've liked it, share it, like it, subscribe if you want to hear more. With this experience with foolishness I've just experienced, I intend to upgrade my kit. I'm going to buy a new PC, start interacting with AI. There's at least 2 different programs I've looked at. If you have some suggestions for content creator AI or anything like that, I'd love it in the comments. If you have questions, statements, threats, if you just want to call me a moron, comments are what I really look forward to the most. Because if you ask a question, I mean, what's better than a question if you want to actually create content? So yeah, like, share, subscribe. I don't normally do that sort of thing, but I think I'm going to go through some changes here. I've given up gaming, which should save me upwards of around a substantial amount of money. I plan to introduce AI into my content creation. Anyways, thanks for putting up with me, even when I'm foolish. 4th of July is coming. It may be a while before I make another talk because I have some plans and some work I need to do. But for me now, it's just the way of life. I work, I meditate, I take notes when something occurs. Once the notes build to an actual topic, it's some cohesion of substance, then I talk. So it may be that I won't talk until I've got AI and upgrades going on. But who knows, like today. But I won't give up. As foolish and silly as it may seem, as ineffective as it is currently, I won't give up. Thank you for your time, and I hope you have a good weekend and enjoy the 4th of July.